Hello, everybody, and welcome to USA Experience and Reform of Career and Transition Support for High School Students with a Disability. Just before we get started, I'd just like to give an acknowledgement of country. On behalf of the Australian Centre for Career Education, ACE wish to acknowledge that we are hosting this webinar on the land of the traditional custodians, being the Wurundjeri peoples, and pay respect to the elders past, present and emerging, and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters across Australia. We also acknowledge the traditional custodians of the various lands on which you all work today and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in this webinar. So that's it from me, and I'd like to hand over now to ACE CEO Penny Dorr.
Thank you, Dave. Well, welcome everyone and thank you for attending today. I would like to thank the Career Industry Council of Australia for another wonderful National Career Week this year and the opportunity to promote an international expert in disability transitioning to our members and those of you working in education and employment across Australia. ACE is very fortunate to have such a wonderful working partnership with the Brotherhood of St Lawrence, supporting career development in their work with youth, migrants and refugees, and young people with disability. I'd like to thank Michelle Wakeford from the Ticket to Work division of the Brotherhood of St Lawrence for arranging this webinar opportunity with Sara Murphy. I'll hand over to Michelle to introduce Sara, and there will be time at the end of the webinar to answer any questions. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, Penny. Welcome, everyone. It's my honour to be able to introduce Sara Murphy. Sara is the Senior Training Associate of TransCen and the Director of TransCen's WorkLink program. TransCen is a US not-for-profit that is a leader in providing training, technical assistance to school-to-work transition initiatives. She's got a focus on systems change in education, career development of individuals with young people. Currently, Sara is the subject matter expert for the Office of Disability and Employment Policy and is part of the TransCen training and consulting team. Sara provides technical assistance and training to US federal and state agencies, schools, service providers, and individuals and families. So we're really pleased to have Sara with us for Careers Week. Welcome, Sara, and over to you.
So I was asked to come and talk to you today about the U.S. experience in career transition supports for students with disabilities and disadvantages. So I'm very excited to do this. I started my career as a high school transition teacher focusing on employment. So it's very near and dear to my heart. But as Michelle said, I'm currently the director of WorkLink, which is a post-school employment program for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities in San Francisco. So some of the stuff that you'll be seeing is some of the tools and strategies that we've developed over 30 years of providing employment and working with the San Francisco Unified School District in the city to really support the transition of youth with disabilities. And as she also mentioned, I'm with the Office of Disability and Employment Policy and then with an organization called TransCen, which is a Rockville, Maryland-based organization that really focuses on transition services, and hence the name TransCen. It actually started out as it stands for Transition Center. And we really focused on seamless transition and getting youth work-based experiences prior to graduation. So again, very near and dear to my heart and happy to be here. So let's get, oh, that's enough of that. So that's what TransCen is. It's a national organization that does technical assistance and training that really does focus on transition to from school into employment. So what are the interesting things that are happening these days in the United States? Well, it's an amazing time. We are really starting to see a lot of shifting and a lot of emphasis on those transition years. People really understand the importance of that moment and getting kids or youth into jobs prior to leaving school. So we are starting to see a lot of collaboration at the state and federal level between departments that deal with with youth and employment and education. And one of the really important things that happened was there was the Department of ODEP, the Office of Disability and Employment, had a program for about 6 years where they gave out grants to states to support collaborative efforts and to encourage them, and to require that the collaborative efforts look at their common customer and really come up with a way to support and serve them by kind of crosswalking systems, making sure that systems were working together, that services were not being duplicated, but also taking care of those service gaps. So it brought together department heads from the Department of Education, our rehabilitation or DES service, and workforce development, a whole bunch of state agencies that deal with employment and education, and had them sit in a room and talk to each other, which was really pretty amazing. And they came up with these blueprint plans in a number of states that have really helped to streamline services, to crosswalk systems, so students are automatically enrolled and knowledgeable about post-school supports prior to leaving, and then also bringing some post-school supports into the schools at critical moments. So really amazing project called the Employment First State Leadership Mentoring Program, EFSLMP. So take a look at that one. The other really interesting thing was there was a lot of system innovation that was happening, and our and people within our vocational rehabilitation services decided that they were not doing enough. They were not doing enough for transition age youth. So they required, as part of their budget, this in 2014, that 25% of their budget be spent on transitioning youth, which was an amazing windfall. So and that's at our federal level. So states can now utilize that money to bring in post-school services, to do things that their education budgets don't support. So a lot of work-based learning can be funded through that. They also offer courses on employability skills, summer youth employment programs. You can be very creative with those monies, and it's again through the vocational rehabilitation services. So it's been really instrumental in kind of helping youth again get connected to those systems prior to leaving school, and also getting connected to employment prior to leaving school. The other thing that we're starting to see is that there's a huge changing mindset and best practice in the United States that's really supporting employment. And that's our Employment First movement, which really kind of really states that employment is the outcome and is necessary for a meaningful adult life, and the cornerstone, the foundation of an adult life. So there's a lot of support, and we're starting to see families of youth with disabilities having really high expectations, and the expectation that their sons and daughters will work. We also have a practice around customized employment, which I'm sure you're hearing about here in Australia as well. And that is proving to be an amazing tool, which I'll demonstrate today. And then, of course, there's a lot of efforts around transition planning and seamless transition, getting providers connected to schools so that students and families are aware of what's available post graduation. So what are we seeing? Today, the efforts by these state agencies to develop practices for supporting students to obtain employment upon graduation. Or internship programs and work-based learning experiences are increasing in districts across the country. We're starting to see school-to-work partnerships, again, with those post-school services, really flourishing. It's really pretty amazing. And then again, those expectations are now common, that employment will be the outcome, upon graduation, and are really focused on kind of the disability and what's broken and what's wrong, and look at how to fix that. But that really kind of, again, walks you into a corner. So, what we as teachers really need to do with students, especially students who are disadvantaged and disabled, that, we really help them to figure out what's meaningful for them, what their skills and passions are, what their aspirations are, what their life experiences are, and really kind of help them to understand that they're not broken. What we're really trying to do is help students focus on, again, what their skills and strengths are, not what's wrong and what's broken, and also what's meaningful for them, and how they define themselves, and what their passions are. And one of the things that I did, and one of the handouts that you're given, is a strengths not deficits list. I worked with teachers who, when I looked at how they talked about their students, how they presented them in reports, they had a bunch of terms that were really deficit oriented. And when I said to them, you can dial those back just a tiny bit, and then they're strength-based. And in the right environment, those deficits are actually strengths. So I gave them this list. And on one side was the deficits, and on the other side, we came up with dialing it back a little bit and what those strengths were. So if you look at that sheet, one of them, for example, was willful. The student is willful. And I said, well, if you dial that back, that student is determined. And they kind of took that into and started thinking about that. And so then we went down the list, and they created, they dialed them all back. So argumentative, they came up with committed. Obnoxious, they came up with driven and tenacious. Disobedient, the student was disobedient. They came up with nonconformist, renegade, rebel. The student is aggressive. They came up with macho, bold, physical. So you can see, if you start talking about students not in that deficit, with that deficit mindset, but in a strength-based way, it really reframes how we see them, how the world sees them, and most importantly, how they see themselves. So we also need to look at really rethinking our transition services, making them meaningful, individualized, and student-driven. And we'll be talking about that today. And the other important thing is to really get out of the classroom. Teaching in school is at desks really doesn't work. So getting into work-based learning and getting into the community to teach confidence and skill building in those areas is really important. So one of the things that we'll also talk about today is discovery and skill building, and really looking at purposeful, outcome-oriented services. It's not about field trips. It's really about looking at what the students need to learn and really helping them to gain those skills. Our focus, again, should be on employment, but not just employment, but also community engagement and inclusion. The other thing that transition services should also try to do is to build that confidence and independence in community settings prior to a student graduating. We have students who graduate who literally, and I'm sure that you've heard the term, what we say is fall off the cliff, where they really, they're so used to being supported, and they have the school day, and they go to school and they have their friends there, and when school's over, they don't know how to call their friends. They don't know how to get together with their friends. They don't know how to take a bus because they've been picked up and dropped off by a van. So we have to really build confidence in community settings, and we have to teach them to reach out and hang out with their friends. So student-driven goals in real-world settings are the keys to the kingdom. So goals really need to be not based on curriculums or predetermined group activities, but really person-centered and individualized, really driven by what the students' aspirations, strengths, and post-school desires are. Really focusing again on that community connections, really helping students to get to know their neighbors, get to know their, how to get in touch with their friends, building that social self-sufficiency and social competencies in the real world is so important. And again, as I said, really fostering the idea of independence and self-reliance while students are still in school. So one of the things I wanted to talk about were the killer concepts, you have probably heard them. One is readiness. The person has to be ready for work. Well, if we all waited until we were ready to work, most of us would not be in jobs. So when you think about it, I went through a university program to get my teaching certificate, and that first day in the classroom, I realized that I certainly wasn't ready. So if we wait till a student is ready, again, they're not going to be in a job very soon. The other thing what we need to look at is, the realistic goals. That's not realistic, and kind of stepping on those ideas. This is Melissa. She's a young woman, as you can see, with Down syndrome, and her dream was to be a teacher. And instead of saying, you can't do that, we looked at what does it take to be in a classroom. There's 3 levels. There's a para, there's a teacher's aide, and there's, obviously the teacher in the United States. And we looked at the qualifications for a teacher's aide, which is a highly, a better paid than a para position. And there's a certification required, a few classes and a certification required. And we took her through those classes. We tutored her through those classes. And then we contacted the school and we said, we understand there's a certification process, but could you come and observe her in the classroom? And could she do that instead of taking the written test? And they agreed to it. And they came in and she was running a nice little group with about 4 students and was doing a nice job. So they certified her. And she is now a teacher's assistant in a kindergarten classroom in an elementary school. So again, not saying that's an unrealistic goal and squashing it, but really supporting students to really explore and find their way. And again, those low expectations, we really, shooting low and achieving that is only doing half the job. So what we have to do really with transition plans is they need to be tailored. They need to be tailored around the student, and they need to be focused on the student's strengths, skills, and interests. And these transition plans, again, not pre-existing sites that you have developed, and everybody, when I look at some classrooms, I see the same sites, the same community sites being used each year for work-based learning. And all the students go through the same locations. What we want to do is build those and tailor those based on students' desires and interests. And then, of course, supporting students to achieve his or their desired goals is the be-all, end-all. And as I said, focusing on independence, reliance, and self-reliance is key. So how do we do this? We need to really engage with the student's family and support network, because that's what they're going to have in their pocket when they graduate. So really looking at how do we make sure that families are part and parcel of this, and that we're supporting and augmenting what is available. The other thing is we have to learn to listen, not lead. So we have to learn to listen, and so we have to learn to listen, and we have to ask the question, what are your strengths and interests? People with disabilities have not been asked this. and again, as I said, it's always been, we've always been kind of focused on what's broken, what's wrong, what needs to be fixed. So when you think about, where can we learn the most about a person and where we should be asking this question, we should look at where we're most relaxed and where we're at our best. So talking with families, getting into the person's house is what we need to do. So as a teacher, you should do a home visit. You should go get to know that family. You should get to know what that person's life is like, and identify potential activities and things that you should get into their house and get in and see, do they do chores? Do they help? What is their life like? And identify, people to interview and talk with, maybe neighbors, siblings. You can also see, what kind of employment opportunities might be available around the house, or the neighborhood, and then also the accessibility and transportation options. So I want you to think about, with your students, how would you start a conversation with this young man? And when you look in his room is his kingdom. So one of the things that we encourage teachers to do is to get inside their bedrooms and see, kind of what's important to them. So you can see this young man's got posters on his wall, Madonna, and I believe some other rock band. He's got trophies. He's got pictures of his family. His room is very immaculate and neat. So really, you can see, you can get to know a lot about this young man by just seeing his personal space. So home visits are incredibly important and an important part of discovery. Really, discovery is really figuring out who that student is and what they're really good at. So with discovery, it's an assessment method that is being used to kind of identify and target employment for students with disabilities. And it's part of our customized employment method. So discovery, what we're finding is really an amazing tool. The question with discovery is not if a person can work, but where will they work and where can they add value? So in order to do that, we have to get away from our old assessment tools, which are paper and pencil. Do you want to mop a floor? Do you want to arrange flowers? Do you want to deliver mail? Students have never probably delivered mail, arranged flowers, and maybe they've mopped a floor. So, if you give them that, they may not understand what those jobs entail. They may not really know, how to make a selection. And they also may select the one that they've done, the only one they've done, which may, in most instances, probably mopping floors. So you can see with that cartoon, all the bees in the classroom are worker bees, and that's what they know. So, these career suggestions are based on your personality assessment, and they all say worker bee. So again, it's what is what comes out in these paper pencil assessment tools. What comes out in discovery, or one of the things that we find, is that, exposure. So being exposed to things leads to interest. So exposure precedes interest, and interest precedes motivation, and motivation precedes employment. And I don't know how many times I've been told, well, that student is unmotivated. The student is unmotivated and doesn't want to work. Well, what we find is the student doesn't really understand what their options are, or the options that they're being offered are things that they're definitely not interested in. So what we need to look at is how can we expose students to a variety of employment settings and identify what their interests are so that they'll be motivated and excited about the idea of employment. So one of the tools that we use, and I've given you a handout of this as well, is the positive personal profile, a simple one-page form. It's really a very empowering little document. We give this to the individual, his family, his siblings, his neighbors, anyone who knows that student well, and it's focused again on the student's strengths, values, and interests. So what this little tool does, this one-page form, it really reframes how you see your students and how they see themselves. And I've had parents cry when they're filling this out, because they see this and they say, I've never ever looked at my son or daughter in these terms before, and now I can actually see them as being an adult and a worker. So it's really the starting point for job development and community engagement. So how do we strengthen employability? Obviously work-based learning is the key. So in your classrooms, you can really encourage the idea of work through various means. So again, starting with the students' interests and strengths and making sure that you're exploring those in your classroom, but also in real life. So using that discovery and positive personal profile really gets students thinking. And kind of identifying who they are and what defines me. One of the teachers who worked with students with more significant disabilities actually traced around her students so that she had this big life-size picture of each of her students, and she put them up on the wall, and she had them, as throughout the course of the year, put pictures of things that they were interested in. So students started bringing in pictures of their pets, pictures of their families, pictures of them at the work-based learning sites that they're excited about. So at the end of the year, she had these collages of pictures on these paper cutouts that were the student, and the students owned them and they built them. So it was a brilliant way to really kind of encourage the idea of discovery and who I am and what's important to me. And then, she could use that to really focus and target in on employment and community engagement options. So volunteering, internships, community service. We encourage families to have chore lists, making their sons and daughters more active participants in the family. So really, being a helper, and you're part of this family, you're going to help. So you're going to come home and unload the dishwasher and sort your laundry and walk the dog. So chore lists are a great one, and families will thank you for those. And also celebrating, the students who are interning or working or taking the bus by themselves. Having that wall of fame in the classroom is a great idea. This is our WorkLink wall of fame, and anybody who gets a job gets up on that, and anybody who takes a bus by themselves gets up on that. So it's really a great way to encourage kind of that independence and employment. Another work-based idea and program is Project Search, which is a really great intensive internship program that in professional settings that really is a great way for students to get out there and really learn and experience work. And there's a couple in Queensland, and there's 100, or I would know even more, probably about 600 sites across the United States. And it started in a hospital, but we're now, seeing Project Search sites and internship sites in hospitality, banking industry, manufacturing sites. So a lot of big businesses participate. And having that kind of institutional cachet is a great way to kind of approach really prestigious businesses and really get in. And what we see as an internship in a prestigious business before you graduate really is a game changer. Having letters of recommendation from a Kaiser Permanente department manager that you can that's part of your dossier is a very, very strong tool. So you give them slam that with your resume and it really stands out. So project search is a great thing. The other thing that we encourage teachers to do is any volunteering situation is to treat it like a job. So it's not an activity. You don't kind of select to go, and you know the group changes every time, every week. Here's the 3 places that or the 2 places we're going to that you could go today. You know, you pick which one you want. No, it's again based on the interests and passions of the student and what they want to explore, and building a group around a group of students who wants to explore a similar site or can learn a skill there is how we build the group. And then the group goes, we develop the community training site, and then the group goes on the same day. There's a time card, so they punch in, punch out. It's different than being in a school or a class. It's different than going to the gym or playing basketball in the park with your friends. Work is different, and so they have a time card, and they punch in and out so that we can teach that kind of employability time management skill. Then our other focus is really on those soft skills, completing the task, initiating, taking, you know, I'm done, what's next, taking direction from a manager that's not a teacher, you know, so, and, you know, kind of getting the job done. We have some people who are real clock watchers, and they'll be like, it's 3 o'clock, it's time to go. And they have 1 more to do. And the teacher will say, oh, no, we got to get the job done before we leave. So again, volunteering, again, it's not about just bagging rice. It's really about learning employability skills and developing that dignity of being a worker, and that idea of giving back and being a helper. And it really does resonate with students, and and you can just see them grow. And kind of change from, you know, shy and scared to very confident adults. So we work on hard skills, all sorts of things, all of these things, money skills, math, reading, tech some more. So helping people to use computers, phones, apps, things like that. You know, all sorts of vocational skills, time management, like I said. But the big thing is these soft skills, because these are the things that lead to job loss. So really working on manners, physical, you know, stamina and endurance, focus and concentration, problem solving. So teachers are in there messing things up so that students have to figure out how to fix things. Taking initiative, being able to work independently. And then that professionalism, you know, looking good and no hugging. So we actively teach social skills at all of our work sites. So, you know, and there's, you know, we grab those teachable moments. We kind of create opportunities to interact with others. This is a data sheet that we use, and we teach the students stop, listen, and respond. So if someone comes up to you and says something, either hello or I need you to do this, that you stop, you listen, and you respond. Because oftentimes students listen to their teacher, but they don't listen to, you know, their manager. So we have to teach them to listen to others, and kind of creating those opportunities to work with other people too. So we assign peer mentors and into leadership roles at these sites, so that they get an opportunity to give direction to others, and they get an opportunity to report out what they've done. The other thing I wanted to share with you is a T-chart to teach social vocabulary. When we're working with students with autism, oftentimes we talk to them about being flexible or being responsible, and they don't really know what that means. You know, they're very concrete thinkers, and they you know, and they can't, social constructs and concepts are really difficult. So we use a T-chart that says, you know, what does this look like and sound like, so that they can get their head around, you know, what does goofy mean? When someone says you're being goofy, what does that mean? What does teamwork mean? You know, what is love? What is initiative? It also identifies, distinctions between similar things. So friends who are boys and boyfriends are things that we can do. And then we can also compare and contrast social constructs. So respect and disrespect, professionalism and unprofessionalism. And they can learn when you say you need to be professional, they then know what you're talking about. This is a sheet that we use for developing work training sites. So we give this to all of our staff, and everybody that works at the school should have these. And what you do is, it's a leave behind. So if you are going out and trying to develop a site based on a group's interest or passion, you can walk in and ask to talk to somebody, and if they're not available, you can kind of leave this behind. Also, business cards and emails, kind of professionalizing the idea that this is a volunteer training program. It's not you're just kind of willy-nilly being out there. So create something like this for your classroom and for developing your community sites. The other real beautiful thing about this is it has testimonials from some of the places that we work at. So that's a really strong thing to include. So I talked about our getting to reframing students. And so this is Stephen. And the need to reframe is pretty apparent. This is what his file said. Cornelia de Lange syndrome, stutters, emotionally immature, gastroesophageal reflex disorder, resistant to new things, perseverates, OCD. So again, everything that's broken and wrong about Stephen. Late attendance issues, especially when he's anxious, or unmotivated. That was in there too. Lots of unmotivated, limited academics. So again, really walks us into a corner, doesn't give you any information that you can use to help Stephen explore and discover really who he is. Doesn't want to work. That was the last one. So yeah, he was afraid of the idea of the idea of responsibility, and really didn't want to work. So that's what he said. So we went after that. We started having him, making decisions was hard. He didn't believe he could do it. And he would look to his parents. You'd ask him a question and he'd immediately kind of look to mom and dad for the answer. So we put him at a food bank where he had to make 1,000 decisions. Is that a good carrot or a bad carrot? And you can see there's probably 1,000 carrots in that box. So he would have to sit there and he would pick it up. And it would, when he first started, I think it would take him 5 minutes to decide if that was a good carrot or a bad carrot. And the good carrots went in the crate and the bad carrots went in the compost. And he would literally hold it up and ask, us to tell him if that was a good carrot or a bad carrot. And we of course wouldn't. And he had to learn that he could make decisions and trust himself. Once we got him kind of, rolling and helping and doing things, we put him into a project search site at Kaiser Permanente, and it was a big deal. He, having a badge, he loved having a badge. He really was excited by police and fire and EMTs and disasters. A good disaster, he really liked that. He had a police scanner that he had that he carried around and that he listened to. So this was a big deal. So we put him at project search and we had him in charge of writing tickets for the doctors. So he would, if the doctors didn't have their placard in their car in the parking lot, they got a ticket. They got 3 tickets. They didn't get to park in the parking lot anymore. So for him, it was really, he was like a policeman for a while. So he was walking around doing that. But the really funny and kind of amusing thing was that it was difficult. The most difficult part of that job was determining what the color of the car was. So he had to put the license plate number and the color of the car, and he couldn't decide if it was blue or green. So we had his job coach go out and get a sheet from a body shop for that painted cars that had, a list of like the colors you could choose. And so she brought that in and gave it to him and said, here's your color code. So he would look at that and he would say, okay, well, that one's a Malibu blue car, and he'd like put Malibu blue on the ticket. So it was really pretty amusing. And these doctors were getting these tickets with, you know, fire engine red, and you know, it was pretty amusing. But really great opportunity. He worked in the pathology department, which was right up his alley. Going to the morgue to get, you know, samples of, you know, things for the pathologists, and you know, and then going to the OR, and in the grossing room, his favorite spot. So yeah, it was a really great experience, and he really enjoyed it and learned a lot. So what did we discover is, you know, he loves, like I said, a good disaster. He's very organized. He is really good on and very adventuresome. Goes geocaching with his dad for fun. He follows the rules. He's you know, hence the ticket job. He was really excited about that one. So following the rules is really important. Collecting patches, really important. He collects patches from bus drivers, police officers, all sorts of anything with a uniform, and has about 250 of them in his room. Hard worker, only when motivated. So if he's motivated, he really works hard. So what we looked at is, how do we take what we've learned? How do we take what we've learned about that student and really approach employers in a strengths, not deficit approach? So I don't know how many of you have ever seen a sign like this, but company looking for an individual with developmental disability, autism history, aggressive behaviors, extensive history of segregation, preferred, social challenges, anxiety, okay. Supportive coworkers, call for an application. You don't see postings like this. And so again, we have to stop looking at those things and really start looking at what this person brings. So again, starting with that positive personal profile, because employment is not about what is broken and what's wrong. It's about adding value, bringing value to the workforce. So really looking at a student's strengths and aspirations is critical. And what you're really trying to do with this profile is to identify, where will your students sparkle? Where will they really fit in? Where will it be like working at Disneyland? So no more selling disability. I hear teachers going out and saying, I work with students with disabilities. And the first thing they probably all hear is, oh, you must have such patience. So we have to stop using that term. So you know, and we have to stop going in and asking employers to give him a go. He's got a disability, but will you give him a go? You know, hire the disabled, the untapped labor pool. All of that is really stigmatizing. So we need to focus on the individual, the student's skills, and not tax credits and stipends. And customized employment is again the bee's knees. It is not job carving. It is really building opportunity and jobs based on an employer's need and a job seeker's strengths. Job carving is going in and saying, John, you posted a position for you know, and you have about 6 things on there. Johnny can't do the cash register. Can we take that off? And right away, that employer is seeing Johnny as a charity case. I've got to adjust my jobs based on Johnny. And what we really have to do is go in and say, this is what Johnny can do, and this is how this is going to benefit your business. So really stop stigmatizing our students. So I have included an elevator speech. You know, when someone does ask you, what do? You don't want to say, I'm a special ed teacher and I work with students with disabilities. You don't want to focus on disability or disadvantage, but take a look at that. We don't have time to go through it, and make sure that you're not stigmatizing and stopping that conversation before it even starts. So customized employment is a strengths, not deficit approach. Again, it focuses on the student's strengths and preferences and presumes that all job seekers are ready to work. It's a person-centered discovery. That positive personal profiling is essential. It really identifies what the job seeker likes and can do. And then we use that to target a business where the job seeker's unique characteristics and skills will be seen as an asset. And it shifts the conversation with an employer away from disability to adding value. So customized employment is really about making dreams come true. Here's Stephen, you know, regaling a police, well, actually fire department worker, and he stops police officers and fire people and anytime he sees them, so he can talk to them about what they're doing. And that's his hat. His hat has, you can see it's a San Francisco police hat with all sorts of badges and things. So he's really into these types of things. So based on his discovery, we do these Venn diagrams. So we look at, where's the center, that bullseye for him, and who's this employer. So something that has to do with maps and public transit, helping or directing people, disaster preparedness or safety. So people were coming up, and you kind of use this to spin out of your box. So people kind of came up with ideas like TSA agent at an airport, maybe helping at the American Red Cross. And you generate ideas based on the center of that bullseye. And we drop different things into each of these bubbles. So here's another one. So anything that Stephen's interests, skills, deal breakers, anything that's on that positive personal profile can go into these bubbles. So he likes gear, police, first responders, organizing things. He loves to organize things. So what would that be? Well, here he is. He works at a uniform store that Galls is the name of it. And they outfit police, fire, EMTs, and bus drivers. There is a whole back room full of patches there where they sew them onto the uniforms. He is responsible. It's a very labor intensive process outfitting these people. So the store staff has no time to really take care of the shop floor. And it's messy, really messy when we went in, and in the back room, they never get things unpackaged. So we presented Stephen and said, he can't, he wouldn't be able to really help outfit somebody, but he certainly can work straightening the store and restocking the khakis. He can certainly unpackage and sticker the incoming merchandise and shelve that in the backstock area so that the team can find things faster. And that's what we presented, and that's what the employer said, bring him on. So lessons learned today: really learning to listen and not lead, really following your students, really letting them talk about, what defines them, and using that to really build a path forward. Focus needs to be on the student's strengths and skills, not deficits. Really teaching employability skills needs to be done in the real world with real tools. You're not simulating and mocking things up. And then the other thing that we see is employers hire motivated workers who can add value to their business. So the last one is really the key for teachers. Work-based experience, customized employment is a very effective strategy. And I can't say enough about work-based learning. So really get out there and make sure that your students have that opportunity.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for that wonderful presentation. I know it's probably quite late in LA at the moment, so thank you for joining us to answer any questions. We appreciate you attending today. It's terrific. I hope we haven't kept you up too late.
It's not my finest hour.
Terrific.
But happy to be here.
Thank you. And thank you, Michelle, for organising that wonderful presentation from us. Very interesting to hear what's happening internationally and get an international perspective. Does anyone have any questions to ask?
I just had a question, Sarah. It's Michelle from the Brotherhood of St. Lawrence. Just around at the beginning talking about that there was funding available for kind of the post-school world to work with the schools. Was that kind of done on a school district where there was a determination of where that funding could be used, or was it more from a state-based kind of approach?
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear the beginning of it. What are you referring to as far as the schools?
So the funding that was available through that federal funding that went to the states. So I wanted to know whether, how that was determined, what that was used for, and whether it was on school district or broader.
Yeah, so that was it was federal dollars initially, and what they did was they said that 25% of them at this, it's a pull down, it's a matching fund in the United States. So the federal dollars are a 4-to-1 match in the United States. So states pull down dollars based on their own state budgets. So the state budget would pull down, if they put up $2, they'd get $8 back, and 25% of that had to be used in transition age youth, which was just a godsend because it really opened lots of opportunity for service providers to come into the school system and provide technical assistance and training and classes for students in summer youth employment, and do that work-based learning stuff that is so difficult because it's so time consuming. And it's difficult for teachers because they have a whole classroom full of students that they have to pay attention to. So it really was a game changer. And it's really been instrumental in getting kids connected to that post-school system before they leave the classroom as well.
Thanks, Sarah.
Sarah, I'm just wondering how much employers have really come to the party and embraced this. It looks like it's been quite successful, but very interested in how something like this might play out in Australia.
Yeah, well, we have to learn to approach employers as a business, and oftentimes we go in I think with our social worker charity hats on, and it really doesn't serve us well. So if we learn how to go in and explain to business just how a specific student's skills and strengths can add value to their workforce, there's no reason they would question or it really changes the conversation. It's not, you're not going in and trying to sell something. You're going in and you have a solution for that employer, and it is really a very easy conversation at that point, because employers really want to hire people who are motivated, who are really excited to be in their business. Like Stephen being in Galls, he was thrilled by what they were doing. He was thrilled by the people that they were serving. And I don't know how many of you have worked with a person who isn't thrilled about being at their job, but it's pretty miserable. So, having that motivation and that just interest in the business is what comes from that discovery process. So the point of discovery is to figure out where will this person really be motivated, what's going to really kind of rock their world, and then helping them to figure out what they're good at, and figuring out, is there an employer in that industry or in that arena that would really value or benefit from that person's skill set. Very different conversation.
Sarah, I just had a question. We run a program where it's for all students in Victoria in government schools in the state of Victoria and Australia, and we're including the specialist centres in that. So with that, we run, probably it's not quite your paper and pen interest test, but it's an online. So it's similar and not ideal, we know, but it's a process of going in and working with students to identify their key interest in areas. The actual crux of all of that is we send in an independent career counsellor to have a chat with them, to help learn about them and identify the areas they like. What we've actually find is that the schools are a little bit hesitant about some of the responses. So if the student says, I'd like to be a stage performer, or I've got an aspiration to be, and they're more afraid. Where we actually find that, and I was taking lots of notes about your Venn diagram, that when we actually break down that they like things and they like people and they like caring and they like performing, that there is something there that the school has often went, I didn't know, I didn't realise, or this could be it. But we're really finding a barrier to that. sorry this is long. Do you have any hints or suggestions as to how we break down that barrier for I think the schools are a bit protective of us coming in and having these open conversations. Lynn actually does the work with the schools, so she might be able to elaborate on that better than me. But that's the message I'm getting back from the schools.
We love going into the home, into the family,
Yeah.
to visit the family, because you get such honest information.
I can imagine. I loved that.
Yeah, and it's better than like sitting across the table from somebody and talking to them about what they can do, because they see you as the professional and that you're going to tell me what I should do, and they clam up. So they really don't respond. So going into the house or going into some place where they're really comfortable and where they have things at their fingertips that really interest them, that they can show you. It's just enlightening.
I think it's an interesting concept. I mean, one of the things I've considered is like, while listening to you and watching today, is allowing them to bring things in. I mean, we probably can't go into the home. It's not something that we can do under our contract. But if we could we do allow parents to come. We do allow, I was thinking about, offering to get them to bring some of their favourite things. It might be somewhere we can start, because we can't quite go into the home.
Yeah, no, and that teacher who drew the cutouts and put pictures and had the students start bringing pictures in, and the students started seeing what others were bringing in, and they were all getting really excited, and they were going home and finding things, and it was just an amazing thing, and it went on for the year. So the collages just grew and grew and grew, and it was just such a beautiful way to really to get their voice, and to really kind of figure out who they are and what they're all about. And as they learned more and more about the student, they could, let's put a picture of that up. You want to put the picture, and they would get to glue it up themselves. So, it was a way especially for students with more significant disabilities, to participate in that discovery.
I love that, Karen. I think that's got hope.
Yeah, I think it has too. I
think that the program Karen is referring to, that we are working with, fits very, very well within what you're presenting here today. I think it's just part of the mix. I'm in and out of a lot of schools focusing on students with disability, and on the whole, they're very much doing a lot of the work that you are referring to. They know their students very, very well. They are hamstrung by not being able to necessarily go into young people's homes, etc. But they are doing the type of work you are suggesting on the whole. Not all. Some are still protecting and limiting due to a care factor, protecting them from society. But the work in our specialists and special schools is just beautiful on the whole. And I find with our program too, where schools are opting out, it tends to be that little bit of protection factor through saying it's not suited to our cohort, but we are looking for something that's better, that adds more value. So that the kids can actually relate more easily to, if their literacy levels are not there. So I think we do have a system here where our students are supported in transition from senior secondary and beyond, where they have supports for a period of up to 2 years following their exit from school, to enable them to be engaged and introduced to the community, but it needs refining. And a lot of those areas you're talking about, those tweaks and that added value factor that would improve our current system too.
Yeah, that's really important. I think the other thing is the protectionism that you mentioned. It's really, I mean, that is going to isolate people. So it's really important that we get at the idea of teaching them community safety, and independence, and using school-based programs to do that too, so that when they do graduate, they can take a bus and they can get around. And I mean, it's very difficult to go to work if you can't take a bus to get to work, and 3/4 of the people that we work with are not going to drive. So it's really important that we teach that community safety, and we get everybody, including the family and everybody, kind of buying into the idea of them being out in the world and being able to do that safely and effectively and not get lost, and then also knowing what to do if they do get lost. So that should be something that teachers really focus on as well.
I've got a question really for both you, Sarah and Michelle. Michelle, with the ticket to work, I mean, how much inspiration was gathered from programs like this?
Huge. So Sarah's colleague, Rich Lucan, came out to Australia 12 years ago and set us on our journey around how do we improve school to work transition. And a lot of the things that we've been working with the NDIS, so that you can now get employment supports from age 14, so that you can, there is the possibility from what Sarah's talking about that you can be working with post-school services in the school to support, things like effective work experience, or we've done a pilot in WA with looking at discovery in schools. So every student got 150 hours of support through their NDIS package to support discovery while still at school. So a lot of what Sarah, what has happened in the US is, for those students with more significant disabilities and have an NDIS package, there are some ways that we can, do that kind of work. So really exciting. But Sarah, you might want to add to that.
I think you covered it. It's I think things are really changing across from what I saw in Australia when I was there 2 weeks ago, a week ago, was very exciting. I think people are really starting to embrace the idea of community inclusion and employment, and things are really moving forward. So I'm heartened by what I saw.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Sarah. Are there any other questions from anyone? All right, well, thank you. I don't want to hold you from your bed. I know it's probably getting late over there and you probably have a busy day tomorrow. So Michelle and Sarah, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation. And Dave, thank you for hosting it for us.